Okay, so today we're making duck legs, braised duck legs. They're just going to be braised in a little bit of canned tomatoes and onions. So I went ahead and seasoned these ahead of time. I put salt and pepper on it like 3 or 4 hours ago and just let them sit out. You know, I try to season my meat ahead of time if I can, but you could just season them right away if you're just doing this right off. So I also scored these, so you can see I put two score marks through the legs and 2 score marks through the thighs on each side. So what we're going to do is, this is a cold pan, and I'm just going to put them in and start rendering this fat here, as you would with any duck breast if you've ever made duck breast before. Obviously you probably know this routine. So the reason I'm also making them like this is because, you know, typically you see like duck legs be made, like the only typical, like the most typical recipe I'll see is duck confit, and you know, most people make that is because you know, that's one of the only recipes I see people make with duck breasts or duck legs, typically because of, you know, all the fat, and you want to slow braise it and render all the fat, and it's a great recipe. But what I noticed is the problem is like it generally requires 4 duck legs minimum, and the only way I can get the duck legs is by buying a whole frozen duck and then taking it apart myself. So, you know, and I'm usually just left with 2 whole duck legs, and you know, I don't really like making duck confit just with those 2 duck legs, because you know, then it's just not enough food for, you know, I'm trying to serve 2 people, and you know, just having the duck legs just on their own, and then just having to make, it's just typically just an awkward amount of food. Portion is kind of awkward. So I like this recipe a little bit better because you know, you get a whole sauce, a whole braise, so you can serve it with, like, you know, roasted vegetables, and it's, you know, it makes a more oops, that's not what I wanted. It makes a more manageable portion. So so here I just have a red onion. I'm going to chop this up roughly. Since this is a braise, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm also keeping some of these onion bits because I know I'm going to make stock in a few days. So, but you know, normally I might just throw these out, but these I'm going to hold on to. So you can see I have it on medium-low heat here, and the fat is going to render out quite slowly on the skin. And I'm probably going to let it sit there, you know, 5-10 minutes, depending on how well the fat renders, and then I'll sear it quickly on the other side, and then take them out to cook out the vegetables. So, yeah, just red onion. You can just chop this up finely. Roughly, whatever. It doesn't typically matter how you chop this, because this is for a braise. So you can use all kinds of vegetables here. I'm kind of lazy today, so I'm just going to use a red onion. You can use a regular onion, a yellow onion, or a white onion, or even just a couple shallots if you want. I just happen to have this red onion. You could also add carrots and celery or leeks or whatever you have in your fridge. Alright, I also have some rosemary, which I'm going to roast off. And let me get a bowl for these. There we go. I'm also going to chop up the garlic roughly and add that to the onions. I'm going to cook them together because I'm not really going to chop the garlic fine. I'm just going to chop it roughly just like the onions. So I just crush these. So yeah, this bulb of garlic has particularly small cloves, so I'm going to use maybe like 7 or 8. It's like they're tiny, so and I like a reasonable amount of garlic. Let's check on the duck legs. So yeah, you can see they're still kind of sticking to the pan, so that means, yeah, this side is still, so that means not a lot of fat, not enough fat has rendered yet, so I'm going to probably let these sit a little bit. Might want to just fry them off the front and bottom. So it's just the end bones here that are sticking a lot, so but yeah, I know let these render just a little bit more. So we just get a little bit more fat out, and I'll probably won't add any like olive oil or grapeseed oil to this. And I'll probably just use the rendered duck fat to fry off the vegetables and the braise. I might even take some of it out if there's a particularly large amount. So, and this garlic I'm just going to roughly chop. And I don't normally, if I'm like using a braise, I won't normally bother to take these sprouty bits out because I don't really notice the flavor of them. They don't really bother me, and especially in like a braise like this. If I were using it raw, then I probably would take it out because the garlic is very pungent when it's raw. So, and you can notice the flavor like that. But in a braise where this is going to cook for several hours, it really won't make a difference. So again, I went ahead and stood these up. I also turned the light on so you can see a little bit better, but there's a nice fat pocket down here on the duck leg, and I wanted to render some of that fat out as well. So the only way of doing that is for me to stand these up. You could also just cut that section off if you were taking apart. If you're getting these from a whole duck, you could just cut that skin off and render it later. But I figure I'd leave them on and just render it into the braise since I wanted all that fat. But yeah, I kind of like the amount of. So if you look closely, there's like, you can see this level of the pool of fat here. I think that'll be enough for the vegetables. So what I'll do is take these out now. Kind of happy with the amount of fat that has rendered. And again, the browning isn't as important now as it is going to be when we put them in the oven, the skin side up. So you'll see. So we have the fat here. I'm going to turn the heat up to medium. Add my vegetables. So again, this is just the onion, garlic, and the rosemary sprigs. And you could, you could add any kinds of vegetables you want, any kind of mirepoix. This is just what I'm going with today because I'm kind of lazy. So we're just going to cook these out. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit more. Let's get up to speed. I'm also going to switch to a wooden spoon. You can see the fond is built up on the bottom, and we're going to scrape a lot of that off now with the water that's going to be released from the onions. So yeah, while I'm sweating these off, I'm going to explain why I'm deciding to shoot videos like this. Now it's been like nearly 2 years since I uploaded last, and if you look at my old videos, those are videos that required a lot of work for me to create. Just editing and filming and making different shots, and that's kind of what made me hate making films before, but I still was very interested in pursuing it. Just the amount of work was really demotivating for me. I really hate editing, and I kind of noticed J. Kenji Lopez Alt's style for filming, and I realized that it's just his point of view. His point of view method for filming requires little to no work or post-production. Then, as opposed to if I were to just like shoot 10 different shots of my cooking process. Here I can just do one long take do a bit of editing afterwards and then upload. So this way I can upload a lot of videos and requires little to no post-production, which is the kind of style that more fits what I'm interested in, because editing for me is really demotivating and a really big hassle. I know it's not for everybody. A lot of people enjoy editing, but I personally don't have the patience for it. So this is kind of why I'm deciding to go with this method, and we'll see how it works out for the next few weeks. So I kind of like where the vegetables are at now. I'm going to add a little bit of white wine just to help deglaze the bottom. I'm also going to turn the heat way up, so to help, because I'm going to be adding in my liquids now, so I want the heat to increase in the pan, because I'm eventually going to be bringing this to a boil before it goes in the oven. So, and I'm going to really scrape out that fond there so it doesn't burn. So, I mean, normally I like rendering or cooking duck in a cast iron pan, because the fat renders a lot better in a cast iron pan just with the heat dispersion. But because I'm doing this braised, you know, I don't want to ruin my seasoning on my cast iron with the tomatoes, especially since I'm going to be cooking this for several hours. That's basically the one thing you can't do in a cast iron. So you could do it in like a, you know, like a stainless steel saucepan like this. This was my other choice, but I figured, you know, I have a more sturdy, this is more of like a sturdy braising pan, so I kind of like this more than I would a stainless steel, but that would work just as fine. So yeah, I'm gonna add a little touch more wine. It was just a splash at first to help deglaze, but now I'm gonna add maybe another splash. That was about, I don't really measure it, but as per my channel name, but that was about a half cup. You know, I wouldn't, if you were making this recipe, I wouldn't measure anything, because you know, for two reasons. One, you want to get an eye for, you know, how much ingredients you would use in a certain scenario, like how much wine you would deglaze with. You should get an eye. You shouldn't measure out every time, because you could just, when you're deglazing, you typically want to just pull the bottle down and deglaze it right away. You don't want to have to measure it beforehand. So getting an eye for how much wine is appropriate is a good practice to learn. And the second thing, this is a braise, so you know, an extra quarter cup of wine isn't going to make a large difference in the end. So. All right, I'm gonna let that reduce a little bit, just to evaporate some of the wine, and then we'll add in the tomatoes and get this into the oven. So it looks reduced enough. I'm gonna open these tomatoes, and these are just regular canned tomatoes. A lot of you are probably thinking, like, why am I not using San Marzano tomatoes? First off, I only want 14 ounces. Whoops. So I only want 14 ounces of tomatoes. You know, I can only get San Marzano tomatoes in like a 28 ounce can, and that's like way too much for this recipe. So, you know, so I want just a smaller amount of tomatoes just to have the tomato flavor. And San Marzano tomatoes are also much stronger, so they really would like overpower this dish, which, you know, I don't really want. I just want the tomato, not only the slight tomato flavor, but also they're in these nice chunks, so it's more appropriate for this. But you can use what you have, use what you want. You don't even have to use tomatoes. You could just use if you just had like onions, garlic, carrots, celery, and you just wanted to put in some chicken stock and just braise them, that would be fine too. It would still come out great. So yeah, so I'm gonna bring this up to a boil. Also, here's a trick. So, you know, typically you get a lot of like leftover, I don't know if you can see that, but there's like a lot of leftover tomato chunks in there. So I have a little spray bottle of water, which I'll do is I'll just spray a little bit in there and get the rest out like that. So this way, and then the rest of this I can just recycle. So yeah, so this we're gonna bring up to a boil. I'm not going to put the duck legs back in just yet. What I'm going to do first is I have these demi-glass cubes. I highly suggest you make some. There's a number of recipes on these that were made with goose stock. I'm just going to add in one. If you had just regular stock, you don't really need this, but I don't have any just stock on hand. So what I'm going to do is add water and just one of these demi-glass cubes. And so it'll essentially be a substitute for stock. But if you had just regular stock, you could also use like stock cubes or packets for this. Mix it in, but I would just normally just use regular stock, as I said. But this is a good substitute. This was actually made with goose stock that I had left over from Christmas. So thought I'd try it, and it seems appropriate in another bird recipe like this. So. I'm also going to add just a little bit of water. There's a lot of liquid with the tomatoes, as you notice, so you don't need a lot. That's maybe another half cup. And I'm also going to braise this with the lid off, so this way the skin can brown nicely. So that's why I want a lot of liquid, because it's going to evaporate in the oven. So yeah, now I'll add back the legs, and it's okay if some of the liquid comes off the top, comes over the top there, because we don't want this to brown the entire time. And, the liquid will evaporate, and then like after the first hour, and then on the second hour, the skin will be more exposed and start to brown. So so it's fine if a little bit of liquid covers the top. Oops, grab that. So yeah. And also add some salt. I seasoned the duck legs beforehand, but I like to add a little salt to the braised just about now. So this cooks with the salt. Then you could always season the braise at the end as well, because you're going to be serving it with the sauce. So. And I highly suggest getting some of these spoons, these wooden spoons, because they're so useful as not only as tasting spoons, but as basting spoons as well. Like if you're basting like a fried egg in a nonstick skillet, if you don't want to use a metal spoon and scratch it, these kinds of wooden spoons come in handy a lot. Plus this has a long handle, so you can get down into tall pots and taste sauces and stocks and whatnot. So so these are really useful. I highly suggest getting a set of these if you can. I'm just gonna taste this. Yeah, it tastes good. Sometimes I might add a little sugar, but I think the tomatoes were sweet enough, so I don't think it needs anything. The salt definitely helped. So yeah, once this comes up to a boil, we're gonna toss it into the oven. I have the oven at 350, and it should take anywhere between 2 to 4 hours, depending on how much liquid you have, how many legs you're doing. You really want to get the legs to the point where they're just like, if you've made duck confit before, you know how the leg joints just basically come apart, and that's kind of what I'm aiming at. You can also do this recipe with a number of different proteins. Like I can imagine it'll be quite good with pork ribs or chicken legs, or like beef shanks, So, this can be done with a lot of. This is just a base braise. It's almost just a base recipe for braising anything. So, and you can adapt it to the way you like to do things. So, or the kind of proteins you like. All right, so that's boiling enough, I think. I'm going to open the oven and drop this in. So turn the heat off. So another hour has gone by, roughly. Take them out. So you see how much, hold on, let me close the oven. So you can see how much color has developed now on the skin and how crisp it has become. And I'm gonna get another plate out. Small plate. Just to show you how how much the joint here has separated from. So you can see how much the meat is coming off the bone there, and I'm not going to touch it because it's really hot, but the joint here is, you can see how flexible this joint is, and that's really what you're looking for, is basically the thigh bone and the leg bone have separated, practically separated. They're not separate now, but they basically come apart and they're flexible, meaning that really the braise is, the meat is very, very tender. So and yeah, so enough water has evaporated as well to the point where the skin has become very brown, and that's what I was also looking for. One thing you want to keep an eye out when you're braising this is if the water level looks kind of low, you don't want the bottom, the sauce itself to start burning, so you can always add more water. But I'm going to just re-stir this to recombine. You can see there's a lot of leftover fat, but the sauce itself is still pretty liquid, and I don't think I'm going to run it down. A lot of this fat is going to stay in this pan. I don't really want to serve that grease, but I do want to serve these vegetables on top, so that's what I'll do. And so essentially I'll just scoop up the vegetables, leaving a lot of the fat behind. So how I plan to serve this, well, essentially how I plan to plate this is I'm going to have this with, I have a little fennel and radish slaw, coleslaw essentially, but it's mixed with some fennel fronds, some lemon juice, and some yogurt. It's going to be very acidic and very fresh for this. And then I also have some steamed broccoli, which is going to essentially act as my, you would consider a starch here. It's just, essentially it's going to be there to help absorb the sauce, so I can eat it with the sauce. But it's, it's obviously steamed broccoli, so it's, a little bit healthier than you would have with like mashed potatoes or roasted potatoes, or rice even. But you can obviously use those if you want. I just felt like going a little bit healthier today, so I'm going to start just by putting. I'm going to spoon on some of my braising vegetables here. I don't want to put this on top of the leg because then it might ruin the crispy texture of the leg. So I'm going to first put my braising liquid, maybe a little bit more for this portion, and I'm also going to add it here. So make sure you have a generous, because this is basically where all your flavor is coming from, is from this braising sauce. So, and then the leg can go right on top there. And then I like to sprinkle some basil on top. You can also use parsley. I just want like a fresh herb here, and basil seems appropriate. I don't have any parsley in my garden at the moment, so basil will do just fine. Slice it real thin. Just like to sprinkle that on top. Yeah, I unfortunately got a lot of the fat here, so you can see how it's coming off the side, but that's fine. That'll just be on the plate. It's not like I'm serving this in a restaurant, so it's a little bit too much fat. That's fine. It won't make a big difference. And then, okay, so I have my steamed broccoli here. It's not too hot, so again, this is acting as if it were my my starch for this, and it will be able to absorb. I can have this with the braising liquid, and if anybody ever wants more, there's plenty more in the pot itself, so you can always get seconds for that. And for the steamed broccoli, I just put it in a so I have essentially a pot of like slightly boiling water, and I have this sieve that can go right on top of it and just essentially just steams it. So a lot of times I will cook the broccoli or steam it like 2 minutes under what I would normally do it, what I'd normally consider al dente, and then kill the heat, pour all the water out, but then let it sit there so it'll sort of finish cooking and stay warm if I have to, if I can't have it ready right when I'm planning to serve, because then it can either cool down or go soggy if I leave it to stay warm. So that's a little trick for basically having your steamed broccoli ready whenever you want it and having it still be warm. So, and lastly, I have my slaw, which I'll mix up here just with my hand and finish with a nice scoop of that. All right, there you have it. That is braised duck leg. Please tell me what you think of it in the comments below, and if you try this recipe, what variations you might have tried. And I'd love to hear it.